Hello, friends. Welcome to a new episode of Merging Minds powered by BureauWorks. Today, I am excited. I am excited because I'm bringing in a great friend of the industry, a great leader. I am inviting today the one and only Pavel Soukenik. Pavel is Czech. I'm going to tell you a little bit what he's done because Pavel is an adjunct lecturer at the University of Washington where he's been nurturing future innovators in localization for 11 years. He's known for leading a remarkable growth as a VP of strategic accounts and later Chief Officer of Sales and Marketing at Moravia. He was an executive director of WellHub, focused on trust and safety. Pavel is extremely passionate for technology, languages, coupled with commitment to excellence. What I like about Pavel, on top of all of his achievements, is that he's an expert in panic attacks. And Pavel, you have to explain us a little bit about that after the introduction I've done.
Javi, thank you so much for a wonderful intro. That's the best intro I ever got. I'm almost speaking to a fellow Czech person after almost 10 years in Prague, Javi?
Yes, to our audience, I was based in Prague for 9 years, and I've known Pavel for 7, 8. Unfortunately, my Czech is not as good as it should be now. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, yesterday was my last day living in Prague. So,
Well, don't worry about the Czech language. My Spanish is basically non-existent. But yeah, so thank you for bringing up the panic attacks. So I feel, I don't know if many people know that about me. And because it's not something like, I wouldn't be like, oh, this is my conversation starter, or this is one thing you should know about me. But I find it kind of interesting in, it's tangential to localization, I guess, at best. But I noticed that when I worked at Moravia during some like more stressful projects, I started getting these situations where, and I never had panic attacks, so like it's something where like the first time it happens, like you literally think you're dying, that you're having a heart attack or just something. It just like feels like your body is shutting down, you're dying. I'm in the office, I'm working on some big project as a managing group of people. We have meetings and I'm like, I actually need for somebody to help me get to a hospital because I'm not sure what's happening, but it's not good. And I realized like I did not want to get into an elevator. I tried to take the stairs down and it was like I was on the 4th floor. I remember taking the stairs down and just feeling like everything was floating, that I'm going to collapse at any moment. So a coworker drives me to an emergency room. I'm feeling terrible. They let me in. They do measurements, and they're basically, oh, you're fine. There is nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, I don't feel fine. and so like over time, I guess if we have any listeners who suffered something like this,
or a host, like a host has also suffered, maybe not panic, but a lot of anxiety attacks. Here I am.
anxiety happens, and in this world,
It
like
does.
it's not really that uncommon. And I like the thing that is like a little insidious is there is like how there is virtual spirals or cycles, there is also vicious circles.
Mhm.
And so the panic attack is this, I'm not an expert, right? I'm not a psychologist, but essentially it's this vicious circle where your
Yeah.
mind becomes more and more trained, but in a bad way. So you notice something that triggers it. You start noticing that and you start getting worried. And as you start getting worried, it exacerbates the physical symptoms. Then you have more things to notice and worry about. The more worried you get, and it does generally feel like as if your body is shutting down. And later, when I was working in Seattle area, I remember I would get into situations where it was really influencing my day-to-day life. I would have a meeting with a customer, and so I'm talking to a client. We have a meeting, it's one-on-one, and I have to go like, I'm so sorry, can we take a 5-minute break? I have to excuse myself. I need to go outside, get some fresh air, try to calm my mind down, go back into the meeting. Or I remember once I was driving, I had to pull over because I didn't feel safe continuing driving in the traffic because I was going through a panic attack. So
That
that's kind of how
happens
it
as well.
manifested for me.
It is. It is like it's. I think it's good that we bring this up now and we speak about it more openly than we never did before. I think that's an achievement, and I think that helps us overcome these things, or at least share them and feel a bit comfortable. I have that too, man. When I was my first job ever was as an intern in an export department in Spain 15 years ago, and I was not in the localization department or anything like this. It was in an export department, and we were it was a company, we were producing radiators. And I remember my first
Mhm.
business trip ever. I go with my colleague who is an expert in the topic, and he's an expert in the product, and we go on a first trip. I was 25 or 24. I wasn't that kid, but I was 24, 25. We go to Scotland. We sit in front of clients. We pull out the product. And in the meeting before, he told me, "You've been working with me. You've been doing this for 3 days. Now you're the next explanation is on you." And I remember taking out that radiator, putting it on the table, the two clients there, like older people than me, looking at me like this. And I was like, I stood up in a suit and a tie, and I was like, "Hey, this is our product, and this is my colleague who's going to explain it." And I sat down. That was the biggest. That was that was funny. This happened. Oh my god, I will never forget the Pavel.
Oh my goodness! Oh my goodness!
That's it. You're originally from Czech Republic. Where are
I
you from
am.
in
I
Czech
am.
Republic?
I studied there, but if I can just tell you, well, I can tell you that part too. But I did want to finish
Yes.
the story. So what happened with the panic attacks?
Yes, 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 yes.
After years of going through it, where every week I would have like at least one panic attack a week, I was like, okay, this is stupid. Like there has to be something I can do with this. And so I actually went to see a psychotherapist, and I've learned about this technique which she was using. That's often used when for treating PTSD. And as she was kind of talking to me through the initial conversations, she picked up that I would often use like language with water metaphors, like, oh, I'm drowning in work, or like the level. And I would just be, she was like, you often bring like some water mention metaphor, like, do you have some negative experience with water? And I thought about it, and I was like, oh, actually, when I was a kid, there were two separate instances when I was drowning, but like I didn't drown. So like I don't think that's a big deal. And she's like, oh, no, 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 no. Like you didn't drown because somebody saved you twice, but your brain did not know that you're not going to die. Your brain probably thought, no, you're dying because you're in the water, you're dying. And so, long story short, there is this therapy which is very clever. And the way it works is like it can be like some device that sends alternating pulses to your hands, not electric, but just like uh, motion, vibration. And as you're kind of reliving whatever was the traumatic experience that you had, it serves to distract your brain by sending these alternating signals. And so it's a very interesting way how it enables people to reprocess some traumatic experience that happened to them in their life, and not get emotionally sucked into the raw emotion that it brings. And the brain can reprocess that memory and store it away in a reprocessed way so that it no longer has that raw power over you. And so after several weeks, I don't think it was more than 2 months, she was like, no, we're done here. You're cured. You don't come again. And I'm like, well, that's not a great business model. Like, you're serious? Like, don't come again? Like a month and a half, we're done. And we were. I felt good. I have not ever afterwards experienced a panic attack like that before or after. So yeah, I was a little worried about the business model. And she said, don't worry about that. There are so many people out there who need help. Yeah, for anybody who's listening, I would just say it's not something that we need to like suffer week after week after week and be like, oh, now I'll have another 15-minute episode where I'm not able to actually be productive.
Yeah. But now we're talking in 2024, and now, thankfully, and we, like, without being experts in this, we acknowledge that now mental wellness has become a priority in our lives. Like, the level of people taking care of their traumas and of their things
Yeah.
is raised to levels unseen before. And I personally, me too, I work with a therapist in stuff that I don't feel comfortable with, and always recommend it. Right? It's a very interesting thing. It's amazing that we openly talk about it. Right? I hope that one day in the podcast I can invite a good friend of mine who is. I met her through the calls that I was through the panels that I was organizing during the pandemic, and she was a remarkable person who had built the whole mental wellness infrastructure at
Mm-hmm.
Expedia, right? When a coworker feels anxiety or has some certain personal problem that's not allowing him or her to properly develop her
Yeah.
tasks, they was like go to those things. So that's I think that's amazing that we're doing that these days. So and that we openly talk about it,
I,
Pavel.
I, I think it's super important, and I know you asked me about kind of my origin, but if I can start,
Yes.
I will actually touch on something that I did fairly recently when I was outside of
Yes.
localization, working
Yes.
in trust and safety. And as we were talking about this, it reminded me how critically important the well-being and psychological well-being is in that space, because that's where you have, even as translators, we sometimes have to deal with things that are not entirely comfortable when we're
Mhm.
translating something and we need to kind of really put ourselves into the mind of somebody else. But for people who work in trust and safety, it was quite remarkable to see the level of care that goes into it when it's done properly, where you have psychologists on site, so anybody can go and talk to a psychologist in a real time. So that also
Yes.
told me, like, I realized there is good ways of trying to handle content like this, and less good. Yeah, I think the psychology is really important. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that being said, I think that is a great introduction of yourself, and I am super thankful that you come and you tell us about those things, because what I want to showcase in our podcast is the human side of our industry and the human side of our leaders. So having one of the leaders in the industry coming up here and telling us these things, I appreciate that, and I'm sure the audience
thank you.
also does. And now I want to ask you, because I want to go to there to that point. Like, for those like, if you know me, I've been living, or I had my camp base in Prague in the Czech Republic for the last 9 years. And as I said, I'm now traveling Wilbury. I'm traveling around. I don't have a house where I'm set now, although I'm going to end up living in Portugal. I'm recording today from Munich. And one of the things that this industry that we work in, the localization and globalization industry, is that it's so beautiful, Pavel, because there's always somebody living somewhere from somewhere who ended up here in this
Yeah,
industry by near pure chance. So
it,
you are from Moravia, which is the east part of the Czech Republic,
that's
correct?
correct. That's correct. That's where I grew up, and I was lucky that localization exists, because there were only two things I was really good about and passionate about at school, and one was mathematics and programming, software development, which I love. I love that,
Mhm.
but and the other was English. Like, I have an accent, but like, I always enjoyed studying English, and so my first paid job after studying was software development. And I felt that the part that I did not enjoy back then, because it was before people invented, like, oh, you can just release software with bugs, and you can have Scrum and all these methodologies. So back then you did not know how long you will need until your program is ready, right? Because you put something together, then you're debugging, and you have no clue how long it's going to take. Compared to translation, if I'm on page 95 out of 100, I knew exactly how much more time I need to translate the book. So that's how I ended up in translation localization. I joined a small company in Brno, which is the second largest city, called Ando Publishing. And that was a great experience because the company was small. There were like maybe 5 full-time employees. And so
Wow.
everybody had to wear a lot of hats. I'm sure you're familiar with situations
Yes,
where
yes.
it's like that.
Like I particularly love that. I know, and this is whoever is not a critic, but I feel very comfortable working in positions where you have to, in companies in which you have to take many hats,
Yes.
and how that evolves. Me particularly helps me grow a lot because I turn to have this open attitude towards learning and towards doing things that I haven't done, or not, or or rather
Yes.
than other people that prefer not to do it, right? And I agree with you in
Yeah.
this regard.
Yeah.
So I like that.
Totally. And interestingly, like this company called Ando, founded by Jaroslav Sedlar, was not originally a localization company. It was a book publishing company. So he would be translating books. He had translators who would translate literature, and he would publish the physical books. Unfortunately, he had very good taste in books, and the Czech Republic is a very small market when it comes to the number of speakers. So he would publish books I love, like James Gleick's Chaos, which is about the mathematical chaos theory, which is a wonderful book. Everybody should read that. Even if you don't like mathematics, like you watch Jurassic Park, that's exactly what they're talking about there. And fantastic stories in that book. He would publish books with like Irish folk tales, but unfortunately, those books are niche. And when you have an English speaking market or other language, which is a huge language market, you publish something which is a niche, that's not a problem because there will be still a huge number of people who buy that. When you have a small language market, the only way to publish books that are a niche, if you also from time to time publish something that has mass appeal and makes up the revenue that you lose inevitably on these small interesting books. So and a funny story was that at one point, and this is years ago, you'll understand this from the story, he went to a bookstore, a book show in London, and he was leafing through a preview of an upcoming book, and he's like, oh, this sounds like something we would publish, can I buy the rights? And they were like, oh, unfortunately, like 30 minutes ago, this other company already acquired the Czech publishing rights for this. And he was like, oh, it doesn't matter, there are so many books like this. And he comes back, and then a year later, we're like, oh, so what was the book? And it was Harry Potter. And so, because he didn't get Harry Potter, and he wanted a reliable way to have revenue, to have income, that's where localization comes in. Because if the product you're localizing doesn't sell, it does not impact you.
Yes, 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 yes. That is such a fun story, right? Imagine now seeing with perspective is like you could be blaming yourself for this all your life, right?
He had fun with it. He like one
Oh
thing
yeah.
I learned from Yaroslav was the importance of having a positive attitude, and just and we would like, and it's the same even with like technology. I don't want to talk about technology, but even back then we would talk about, oh, machine translation, is it going to
Yeah.
replace us, and so on. And uh, yeah, we would just look at it. No, we just need to learn to be the people who can operate it and leverage it better than other people. So it's kind
Yeah.
of like this matter of fact attitude, and like not to see something as too much of a threat or too much of a like um, tragedy. It's just like rolling with what happens.
And tell us now. Now you're based in the United States. You're based in Seattle now, correct?
That's right. And essentially, there was a point in my career where I turned to the dark side, as I call it, because my background really was translating, project management, operations. But what happened at one point, we had an account manager here in the US looking after some of our key clients here, and he decided to move on with his career. And I was running a small team at that point with maybe 20 people, project managers, localization engineers, and so on. And we were in the middle of an RFP, and it was a big RFP for the key client we had. So I was like, oh, you know what? Let me go there for 3 months, because I could, based on legal restrictions, I could go work here for 3 months. And I said, let me look after the business we have from the account management perspective, make sure we don't lose this RFP. And so I was here for a period of 3 months. So I switched completely during that period from project management to just pure account management. I was looking after multiple clients here. They were Microsoft clients. And when I came back several months afterwards, somebody, and I still don't know to this day who it was, but somebody from Microsoft reached out to Katka Janku and Arturo Quintero, who were the owners of the company, and they said, you know what, it was really nice when Pavel was here. Would you consider relocating him? So on one hand that was very flattering. On the other hand, I was at the same time going through a difficult period of my life. My
Yeah.
dad passed away, so it was just a tough period. And I was like, yeah, actually, that sounds like something I would love to do. So that's how I switched in 2009 and relocated from the Czech Republic, and switched my focus from just the operation to also the account development and ultimately sales.
I like it. I like it so much. I love those stories, and the industry, as I said, has this beautiful part in which everybody's from everywhere, and you're from somewhere, you live somewhere, you speak one or two languages, and you're sort of like, for like at some point you're forced to live and lead in another country and stuff like that, right? Like this part of merging minds. My goal is always to bring the human side of the leader to the people listening, right? And I want to ask you, Pavel, now, if you can, not going a little bit back down or down memory lane, if you can remember those first years in which you were forced to be a leader or you naturally transitioned to be a leader. Can you tell me about that?
Okay, it's a good question. I remember I think I was pretty bad at it. The thing about being a leader, I think everybody needs to find their own strength and how to approach it. I don't think there is one single way to do it. And you could try to imitate somebody, and it's not going to work. One of my strengths and at the same time weaknesses is what if you look at like psychology and how you can evaluate people psychology scientifically. I'm not talking about Myers-Briggs, but if we talk about the big five, which is the scientifically proven way of like how you can kind of evaluate things, one of the measures is, you could call it either excitement or stability, and I score very highly on the excitement part, and that also means like being a little kind of, well, little stable, I guess is a terrible word to say it, but like one benefit of that is I find it very easy to get excited, and excitement is contagious. And I love, one of, as you said in the intro, one of the things I do is education, because I'm passionate about this, and I find it very rewarding and easy to share that with other people. So for me, the path to leadership was twofold. It was essentially how to leverage this ability to easily motivate other people and get them fired up and get them excited about, this is where we're going, this is how we'll get there, and this is
Hmm.
why it's fun. That's the easy part for me. The tougher part for me was how to do it in a way that at the same time manages staying calm, staying in control, not let the emotions get the better of you. So
And I
it's
tell you,
it's a
I
balancing
can
act.
tell you, I think you're super right there in that, and it's just made me think of one thing that happened to me not long ago, and it was actually with a Czech friend of mine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like you, I mean, I'm a passionate person. I come more from a Latino culture, and I'm like, wow, 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 wow. And I always try to bring in the energy, and I always try to bring in the goodwill and the hey, let's all do this together and let's lead together and all that stuff, right? But the other day, this friend of mine Czech friend of mine. He told me like, dude, you drain my energy. And I'm like, oh my, 41 years old. I've never heard this before. And I was like, really? But this is the opposite of the things that happened to me. And here's my question, right? Like, from this perspective that we take on, like, we're passionate people and it's like, hey, let's go, let's do this, let's help each other. How do we deal, especially when we're starting to lead and when we're trying to be the most human possible? How do we deal with the situations in which we're like, oh my God, I made a mistake. I thought that I was having all these things. Has this happened to you before?
it,
Have you dealt with
oh,
this thing like, oh my God, I'm not real match for this thing, for this person?
absolutely. Like it happened to me many times where like we're in a meeting as a management team, and I would get like so upset. I would get visibly upset. Like I remember shortly after I moved to the US, we had the CEO visiting, another key person from the company, and they were super well-meaning, but they were asking me so many questions that I didn't know, and they were like, well, what is their total budget, and what is this, and what do you do, and have you done this, and where is your account map, and where is this strategy plan, and where is the and I didn't have all the answers, and I was getting more and more frustrated. And I think we were all a little bit like perfectionists, which is good, but also it's tough,
It's
right?
bad.
And so
Like, it's one of
it's
the
bad,
things that
yes.
I'm
Let's say
working
it.
on with my therapist. The biggest is about like the fear of imperfection, like the fear. So
So it's
that and I understand, and I understand this is one of the big negative things that people tend to have as well in leading as well. And
yeah.
yeah, and hey, I have not have a solution for this because I'm suffering from this, right?
And I was just getting so frustrated with myself that I didn't have the
Yes.
answers, and I could recognize that a lot of the questions they're asking me are valid questions. And it was 9:30 p.m. I think we after a full day of meetings with clients, and so we're just in the office, still debriefing, still going through all these things. And I'm getting fed up with myself. And I'm like, well, I'm no good for this. This is not a job for me. There is no way I can ever be good at this. And then I just basically got up from the table and I'm like, well, you clearly picked the wrong person because I don't have all the answers and you should have sent somebody else to do this. And I slammed the door behind me and I left. So that would be the example where like,
Do you
yeah,
know
the
how I call
emotions
that?
got. Hmm?
I call that being empathetic. You read the room. You read
Ah,
the room, and you just reacted accordingly. Oh my god.
exactly.
Oh,
So,
that's so.
so that's again like for me, it's something to learn from. But I have another story where again I feel there is a balance, and you mentioned Argentina and the culture and the mentality, and I have this like beautiful memory recollection of visiting Argentina for the first time on a business trip, and it's a long flight, right, from Seattle to get to Buenos Aires. You get there, you're already completely tired. We get on this bus, and I'm told like to go from Buenos Aires to Rosario. And there is this beautiful bus that's much more comfortable than an airplane that takes you there, takes maybe 3.5, 4 hours, but like it's comfortable. So people told me, no, once you're there, you get on the bus, it will be very nice. So we get first on this tiny shuttle bus, tiny, not comfortable at all. And it's supposed to take us to the big bus, right? And so we're going from one airport, and then I don't speak Spanish, right? So I'm totally lost. I'm asking, what's going on here? And after 1 hour of traveling within Buenos Aires, we get to another airport. And I'm like, okay, so it will be 3 hours from now? And the answer is no. We were not even supposed to go to this airport. So it will still be probably another 4.5 hours. And then another bad news was that the big bus, the large bus, would not be happening at all. And we would need to take the whole trip in this tiny small bus that was already crowded. Like it was, people were standing. And then at this other airport, there was a young couple. They had a baby. They're trying to get on the bus. So they get on the bus. The woman is holding the baby, standing in the aisle of this tiny little shuttle bus, holding the baby. And then a gentleman gets up and he's like, I'm not traveling on this bus. This is terrible. like something bad will happen, somebody gets killed, I'm not part of it. So he's getting off the bus, the driver needs to get the luggage. It's like really, but what I noticed was how engaged people were in actually not being afraid to say something. Everybody was speaking up. And I was just reflecting, like, if I was in the Czech Republic, people would be looking outside the window silently and thinking, I'm never traveling with this company again, never in my life. But they wouldn't say
Completely.
anything, right?
Yes.
They just don't say anything. And there the atmosphere was like everybody was contributing on ideas how to handle this. You need to let this woman with the child sit down, and you need to do da da da, and the driver should do that, and the driver shouldn't do that. So we spent another probably 20 minutes just people just talking. And then everybody quieted down. The driver doors closed, and we were, after like 20 minutes of arguing, we were ready to go. And
Okay.
the driver turned around and he said something short in Spanish, obviously. And all hell broke loose. And everybody started shouting again. And I'm turned to this one person who was the only person on the bus who spoke English. And I'm like, what just happened? What did the driver said? What did the driver say? And he tells me, well, the driver said, anyway, it's your fault we're late. People were not having it. But yeah, so I feel like the thing about localization I love is like all these different cultures, and you get exposure to things that I find I really found it like excellent. That
And traveling always makes you learn and makes you like see the world from this crazy perspective, from this perspective that you never thought of. Being a Czech in Argentina, traveling, and seeing how people are seeing that situation there, right? That's
I
what.
I like that because I think that we can notice these little nuggets and incorporate them into our lives. Such as like the takeaway for me was the everybody's of course different as individuals, but I would say like the Czech way of I'm going to just stay silent, think my own thing in my head. I'll be thinking one thing, but I'm not going to speak out loud, and I'll adjust my future decisions accordingly. Yeah, that might not be the best approach every time, right? There is
Yeah.
something about speaking up, sharing your opinions, sharing your ideas. Maybe you could say that it can be done in a more organized way, but yeah, I'd rather err on the side of like people sharing what they actually think. And
Yeah.
I would say that formed a lot of my when you talk about leadership. I think it's about making sure people's ideas are heard. Nobody feels like afraid to speak up, and it's okay to disagree with each other. I think that was
Yeah.
another key learning I had, and I remember again we would have like these management meetings, and different strategies can be all valid from different perspectives. You will likely not, most often you don't get to a situation where everybody agrees, oh, this is the best thing we should do. So it's not about everybody necessarily agreeing, but it's about everybody agreeing to support the joint decision. So I think those are some of the takeaways that I
Mhm.
have about leadership and about communication between people.
One of the things we don't talk enough about in when sharing experiences about leadership when started and when getting started or at any level of development is like, and I like to bring them out if when possible. It's about those failed experiences, those failures that one has, those projects that are not completed on time, those arguments that are there, and you try to hide them behind everything, but no, 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 no. I personally believe that all of these things you're discussing right now, they're not the most pleasant situations. We should bring them up, right? And I want to ask you, and I want you to share, if you can, with us, like one of those failed experiences that you live, or those setbacks that you had as a leader that made you learn, that made you take your career to the next level and make it better.
There is always, things to be proud of, things to be maybe learn from. One of the ones I find interesting is there was one client that the company I worked for had. and lost because it was there were other bigger clients that had a lot of demands. So this one client honestly got neglected, and it can happen. So we lost that client. That actually at that point was not my fault. But then I went and I talked to them, and I'm like, we'd really like to have your business. And the answer was, well, I remember when you had my business and my escalations were going absolutely nowhere. But we got a second chance. So this time it was on me, right? So I convinced this person, you fired us once, give us another chance. And that was then on me in a way, right? And so we got another chance. We got probably a $3 million spend, which was actually a relatively small portion of what this client was spending. And after a period of time, though, it was clear that we did not have the right expertise in terms of like the subject matter expertise. We had problems with quality, we had problems with timeliness. And so I'm suddenly in this situation where like the client calls me up and we meet and they're like, this is not working. And you have 30 days to turn it around or we're going to fire you. And I can tell you that did not feel good because I felt like I made an implicit promise to the customer that give us another chance. They gave us another chance. And here we were. And I was failing. I felt like we're failing them again. So that's something that I would say didn't need to happen. Luckily, we did turn it around. So it was, and again, that's not just obviously like when you're account managing, you're in this weird situation where you're facing the client, you're interacting with everybody on your team. So and it's this very interesting role that I enjoy because it's more about the human elements, understanding, making plans, motivating people. So I absolutely want to credit everybody who worked on those accounts for being able to turn it around. Uh, but yeah, I would say that that was a situation where when I came home, I felt like crap because I felt like, oh no, I absolutely failed this client.
But I feel you learn from it because you speak with it like oh my god, it was like this, and yeah, I still remember now, and that's beautiful. Like imagine you could go back to being uh, the at that moment. What would you tell yourself back then? What would you say the Pavel from now to the Pavel back then?
I would say that I would tell the Pavel back then that it's not enough just to draft a really good roadmap and plan that on paper was actually really great. And that's why the client trusted us for the second time. But you need to stay on top of the execution. You cannot just be like, oh, perfect, we won this back. We have this beautiful, beautiful plan how to make it all happen. That's not enough. So I would say it's the importance of staying close with the execution every step of the way, because in a way, plans are easy, delivery is hard.
So how about flexibility? That is the flagship of my generation, millennials. So how about that?
That's so important. And you know what? As I said, like different leaders have different strengths. For me, the one strength is collaboration, and that goes hand in hand with flexibility. What I mean by that, when you're thinking about collaboration, there are several aspects. It's collaborating with your team, with the members on your own team. You can cross collaborate with other departments. And if you're dependent on, let's say, some technology or something, and the department cannot deliver it, right, you need to be flexible. You need to accommodate. What can the supply chain team do? What can the quality team do? So it's this collaboration between all these elements. And I think that sometimes people forget it's also about the collaboration with the client, and the client may be having some flexibility. We talked about like this wonderful example of how people in Argentina are not afraid to speak up and tell you when something's not right. Um, that in a way saved me because the client was not afraid to call me in and say, we need to meet, and tell me directly face to face, Pavel, this is bad and it's not working and we'll need to fire you. because the client didn't need to do that. And it was this collaboration and this communication that we had that allowed them to be comfortable to tell me that. They might say it anyway, but I feel like it's really important, this aspect of how you collaborate with your client, with your team, and then finding a path that works for all the people involved, right?
And
You
that's the
cannot just
difficult
say,
part.
oh, this is the path, right? This is
Yeah,
how it's going to be.
and that is the difficult part, right? That is the difficult part, and that's when that's where your skills as a leader came in hand, right?
You
I
need
want to,
to, yeah, it's
yeah,
creativity, it's communication and collaboration, I would say. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, not doubt down, not doubt down, friends listening, not doubt down, because I like to speak a lot about theoretical things that and beautiful things that leadership will have, and we speak about them and we point them out. But unfortunately, Pavel, can you think that most of the times you speak with people, not only in our industry but outside of our industry, they say like, I fucking hate my boss. My boss is horrible. My boss has done these things, and then I think we should we it's great to share experiences and to motivate people for a better, because for a better life or for a better work, or because there's people like you out there that really empathetically lead and talk to others like this, right? And take care of teams like this, right?
Y-
So
you're exactly right. I think everybody's been in that situation where you had good bosses, bad bosses. I will
yes,
say one other thing I learned was that I was able to learn a huge deal of things, even from people who, at the time, I was like, oh, this, I dislike working with this person because they like this, they like that. And it's like things that rub me the wrong way. So it's interesting that in retrospect, you can look at a lot of things that happen and that maybe you were perceiving one way at the time, and then you're able to distill some learnings, and there might be nuggets you want to emulate even from somebody you go like, oh, that was a terrible boss.
yeah, yeah. I've never learned more. I mean, I think I told it here before. One of the people I learned the most of was my first horrible boss that I had in 10 years ago, because I knew that I didn't want to be like him. I knew it, but it was needed to have that terrible boss as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And I look, I know like there's no way to make everybody happy too, right? I remember I had like this interaction with one lead localization engineer who passionately believed that every email from the client should go to every single member of the team that we had. And I equally passionately believed that it shouldn't, and it would be like in soccer or football, everybody running after the ball, right? You don't do that in soccer. So I was like, there is no reason like to make everybody feel good by sending them every single email from the client, because most of them are not relevant. And he felt passionately, but we want to involve people. And I felt passionately, that's not how you play soccer. That's not how you do business. And so we had a disagreement on that. I know he left my office like with tears in his eyes. So I'm sure at that point he wasn't happy, because I felt like, no, 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 we cannot do it this way. And I'm not saying it was the right decision or bad decision, but the story is like there will be situations where you're going to disappoint some people. I think that's another reality of life.
yeah,
But as long as people are trying to follow a common goal, right? We know what we're trying to get. We know what the ultimate goal is. I think as long as people keep an eye on that, that makes the collaboration joyful in a way, even in situations where I might have tears in my eyes because the decision that was made was not what I was hoping for, but still, ultimately, this is where we're trying to get, and I can understand where this other person is coming from.
like thanks for the conversation. Like I'm extremely inspired by listening to things like you, like the stories you share, and they're super nice. I like to hear always stories from all around the world, from people from here, from there, that live here and there. And you know what I do normally, what I try to do in the last few episodes we've recorded, I try to ask three quick questions that you need to reply in 10 seconds
Oh
to
no.
end to end the it's just three questions, but this is going to be the end. And first of all, I want to ask you, and you, since you're a very technological professional, in 10 seconds, you have to give me the answer to what is the biggest myth people believe when it comes to technology, in your opinion.
Right now, I think most people misunderstand the nature of AI or large language models, what they're capable of and what they're not capable of. And it's difficult because those things are extremely powerful, and at the same time they're not nearly as smart as we give them credit for, because it's more the cognitive things that are happening in our brains that are so we're making assumptions about them that are completely false.
Yeah. What was the last thing you Googled?
Oh my goodness, I need to go to my browser history. I I was googling Kevin O'Donnell's global 10x.com. He has a Substack publication, and he's a localization guy who worked at Microsoft, Dropbox, and he's doing a lot of interesting writing. So yeah, I was googling him.
What would you tell the 12-year-old Pavel today? That's the most difficult one,
Don't
probably.
I now I know. Oh, I would say, you know what? Don't underestimate the two times you were drowning, and get professional help when you're 20, and you will save yourself several years of like these uncomfortable panic attack episodes.
Oh wow, that's deep. And then the last one, because I always ask this, like, what is your favorite band and song?
Um, I think my favorite band is Queen. Has been for it might be a tie between Pink Floyd and Queen, but
Okay.
it's probably Queen. And my favorite song is Hammer to Fall, because I like rock. Oh, nice, Van Halen. And so that would be the answer to who's the most favorite band of my wife. So
All
that's
right, that's
Van
beautiful.
Halen, and we were lucky enough to see Eddie Van Halen perform while he was still alive, and
You
it
did
was
that?
amazing.
I'm so jealous. Like the last show I saw was Ben Morrison, but I was close to seeing Van Halen in 2008, but I never did. So this is like my loss. Anyway, Pavel, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And thanks everybody for listening to this episode. If you want to reach out to Pavel, go look for him on LinkedIn. As I said, he's an amazing, approachable professional. Reach out to him and he'll probably connect to you and ask and have a nice chat.
Thank you so much, Javi, for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody. Peace and love.